Today we're going to talk about race. Blacks, whites, yellow, red, brown. I think that's about it, right? We're going to talk about race because, well, the other day I was approached by a white person. And it wasn't in a negative way, but it was being expressed to me that black folks can't swim because of their bone density and they're less buoyant. And of course, to me, that was ridiculous. I haven't done any scientific studies and all, but I do know that for a short time in my young life, I was on a swimming team. I've known many black people that can swim. I come from a swimming family, and I wonder, is my family the aberration? Is my family, the exception, or what? It didn't make any sense to me. And so we began to debate this. And so the point was that black folks have denser bones, and so they're less buoyant. That was the point that was being made to me, and it just seemed ridiculous. And so this conversation that I'm sharing with you today is more like the evolution, of that conversation that was started over a month ago. And I guess what's very important to recognize is that the concept of race is what's called a social construct. It was made up. There is no such thing. There are human beings, okay? And so this concept of race, it came about in the 1700s, and it was invented for the purpose of justifying the ill treatment of certain groups of people. So a classification was made based on the color of an individual's skin, okay? And so even in the United States particularly, so when an individual presents a perspective that black people can't swim because of their bone density, I have to ask the individual, is that scientific? And of course, yes, this is scientific studies, doctors, medical, and all this stuff. Well, that's kind of interesting because we'd have to first define what a black person is, okay? Because in the United States there are varying, what's considered black in the United States is a whole wide range of colors, from the color of this wall here, to the darkest black person you can imagine. And so that's the question. The question that, first of all, we have to recognize that the concept of race is a social construct that was simply created to justify ill treatment towards certain groups of people. So it's not even valid. Then when we talk about genetics, we have to bring genetics into the picture. We recognize that we are simply a variety of genetic mixes, okay? Like for instance, myself, my great-grandmother was Irish. Her name was Jeannie Kiley from the Isle of Man. And totally white. And that's on my father's side. But then on my mother's side, my grandfather, her dad, was Mexican. From Mexico, an illegal immigrant, okay? Just saying immigrant, right? And so then you look at, well, the genetic mix of what is a Mexican, okay? Would be the blood of indigenous people from that land, of course. But also be Spanish blood, Iberian Peninsula, and all. We did this ancestry thing. My daughter wanted to do it a couple of years ago, man. And it turned out, to my surprise, that 47% of me is from Africa, and 53% of me is not. Now that was kind of interesting. And so my wife, she's like, in the high 80s or 90% from Africa. And my daughter, she's around in the high 60s or so. So now every time I challenge my daughter or check my daughter, she's in trouble. She goes, why? Is it because I'm black? She loves that. But the point I'm making is that we don't choose what our genetic mix is going to be. What's going to be dominant, what's going to be recessive. But the fact remains that you garner all these particular genetic traits from all of the people of your ancestry line. And the ones that you don't know which. So it's really impossible nowadays to determine that black people have a particular bone density because you don't know from which ancestors' genes that individuals bones were affected by, okay? And it's very important to recognize that. And so maybe, I haven't really done the study on the bone density thing, but before you could go anywhere, even with a study like that, you would have to define what black is, okay? And so you really can't now, again, since I haven't done any type of research, I might give you that if you can go into the deepest of Africa to find the most pure black person who has never had any mixture in his lineage, then I could say maybe you can come up with a definitive, this type person has these type traits. But there's too much of a mixture. Come on, me, 47% from Africa, the rest from other places. So you have my grandfather, of course, so you have the indigenous, ancestry in his line. You have the Spanish conquistadors, the Spanish line in his bloodline as well. But then you go to my great-grandmother on my father's side, who's totally Irish, white Irish. What mixtures of blood does she have in her, in her lineage, in her line? Who Scottish, or I don't even want to use nations, but I'm just saying so many different types of people in bloodline throughout her ancestry. And so all of these genes, we're talking about exponential genes within each of us as human beings. You can't define what a black person is because there is no such thing, okay? I don't even know if there's such thing in existence, but there could be. And for that matter, there's no white people either, pure-blooded white people. First of all, the reality that we all emanate from that same place in Africa, there is no white person on this planet that doesn't have genetics that passed down from a black ancestor. So and I'm no scientist. I have an MBA, so I don't have anything a scientific degree and all. But it doesn't take rocket science to even figure out this much, that you can't make a definitive statement about a black person, because you'd first have to define black person, and you're not going to find a black person that is pure black, with no other mixtures, in his family line, okay? So we had to put that to rest. And by the time I got through talking with this person, and this is a somewhat educated person, not a person that's necessarily educated in a college degree, but an educated, a well-read person. But I think the issue that she was having was that she wasn't challenging or checking her sources. So she sent me on the text the other day, this particular study, this medical study, about the density of black people's bones, but it started off with black people and talking about race. And so if you're going to give a particular perspective on physical attributes that are affected by genetics, then you can't start this article talking about black people because there is no such thing, or even talking about race because there is no such thing. So then I began to scroll to find out who the author of that article was, and it couldn't be found anywhere. There was no author, there was no organization, that was responsible for that material. And see, that's part of the issue we have today. Now really, to be honest with you, I believe that we are so blessed in this particular time that we live because we have the internet. We have all of the information of the world at our fingertips, all of the libraries at our fingertips, anything that we need to know. But we need to recognize that there's also a lot of information out there that's totally invalid, fictitious, and of course never use Wikipedia. Come on, man. So I'm telling you, sort of like the college, investigations, you have to challenge your sources. You have to come up with more than a couple of sources and look for sources which challenge your particular perspective. Okay, so I spent 10 years in college, working on that degree and all. And what I learned in my research was I just wasn't out there searching for articles and for opinions that agreed with my particular perspective. Of course, I looked at those too. But I also diligently searched for any kind of challenges to my perspective to make sure that maybe they didn't have a point, okay? So that's what, I had to talk to this girl. Finally, she conceded, the part about the swimmers. But I wanted to give her, an insight into the reality is that there's no such thing as race. We're all simply human beings with this mixture, this random mixture of exponentially infused genetics into our system, which randomly pop out whether they're recessive or dominant, okay? And what I learned, I really had a good time when I was studying for my associate degree at the local college. I love biology. And I know a lot of people don't, but I love the biology labs. And one particular lab that we did, that some of you will be familiar with, was the fruit fly experiments, as we were studying genetics. Because fruit flies had such a short lifespan, I can't remember what it was, maybe it was 24 hours or something, I don't know. They didn't live long. And so some of them were born with blue eyes, some of them were born with green eyes, some of them were born with brown eyes. And you got to see how the genetics, manifested in particular generations and not in other generations. They just manifested randomly. And so we need to recognize, and the point of studying those fruit flies was to see genetics, how genetics in action, in real time, because the lifespan of those little flies was so short. And so as we correlate that today, you don't know when your bone density, which genetic ancestry you're garnering your bone density from, or the color of your eyes. I mean, and black people are what we call black people is a perfect example of how we cannot call black people, okay? Because you see every kind of color you can imagine. Man, I saw this young girl yesterday at the grocery store, man. She was what we call black, but she was like reddish colored, and she had red hair and curly hair, really cool looking. And I just love to see the diversity. See, with what we call white people, it's very difficult to see the diversity, okay? But when you start adding colors and varying amounts of colors into the individuals, you begin to be amazed. My ex-sister-in-law, she passed away years ago, but she was about my complexion, and she had one blue eye and one green eye. Imagine that, okay? So which ancestor did she get the green eye from, and which one did she get the blue eye from? And which did she get the color of her skin from? I mean, come on now. And so I want to share with you. I think we need to, as we are now in 2023. We need to begin to see things just a little bit more real and stop relying, first of all, on the medical documentation that was created in an era of racism, created racism for a particular purpose, and begin to recognize the genetics of a thing that sort of refutes all of that. These are characteristics of black people. Come on now. We got to recognize that just doesn't exist. Those things are invalid. And we need to rely on the genetics. Period. This is a reality. It's very interesting, kind of maybe digressing a little bit, because I think I made the point, right? I made the point that there's no such thing as race. No such thing as black people. No such thing as white people. We are just human beings with a wide range of diverse genetic mixes that are random. And you just don't know, man. I've seen pictures of kids that pop out, twins, that pop out. One of them has dark skin, one of them has light skin. It's not up to us. And so you cannot define a black person's genetic traits because there's no such thing, okay? And if you want to determine that everybody that's not white is black, from a very wide range and diverse range, then there's no possible way you can pinpoint specific genetic traits that will be particular to this one large classification of diverse people, which are being called black, okay? I'm waiting then for all of the job applications and school applications and all the things that we fill out to drop that race thing, because it's in error. I know they have come to the point where they allow you to specify what you want to be. But the reality is, we're in a day and age where people can define themselves, the pronoun thing. If I was born a male, I can say, I'm a female, or vice versa. Or I could be non-binary, or whatever, And in this day and age where we can choose to be what we want to be, we are now ought to at least be looking from a genetic perspective, on what we actually are. Not to refute the pronoun thing, that's a whole thing altogether. But, in this race classification, we have to recognize that is fictitious social construct that was created to justify the ill treatment of people who are not white. Realize that. And it's simply that. So as much as I loved being black, and I will continue being black, if we really want to narrow it down and pinpoint it, we just have to redefine what black is, or we can accept the definition we have in this nation of this wide, diverse range of black people, but you cannot pinpoint particular genetic traits to black. Even sickle cell anemia. Okay. Now I was studying the genetics thing some time ago, okay? That's what some of it's fresh on my mind. And as we always believed, it's a black, issue, sickle cell anemia. Well, it's not. Sickle cell anemia is an issue from people who are descendant from folks who lived in areas which had malaria, okay? And their bodies over centuries adapted to prevent them from catching malaria, okay? And so without even knowing the medical details or the scientific details, this whole sickle cell thing was simply the body's response to a particular environmental issue that now doesn't really exist, okay? So you're going to find non-black people with sickle cell anemia as well, and the bottom line is, the key is, or the similarity is, that you could trace their lineage back to environments that were malaria laden. You can Google that. I haven't Googled it. I was studying it, so I'm just sharing with you. It's all about genetics. So even sickle cell anemia is not about black people. It's about people who many people of color came from regions that were malaria ridden, but it's the malaria which caused the body to affect a change in order to adapt to that. People that are lactose intolerant as well. So certain places that with the dairy, and I don't even remember the details, so I don't want to go in here and say something wrong. But even the issues that we have today, a lot of them, most of them, pretty much all of them lead back to time past and the body's adaptation to particular environments that those ancestors were living in. Okay, so this was, maybe, I don't know if this was venting. I already felt I don't want to say I feel vindicated or felt vindicated, because I knew what I was talking about. And I guess that my challenge was simply to introduce logic. Even if we don't understand the whole genetic thing, from a logical perspective, we have to recognize that if you're going to do an experiment and make a definitive statement regarding certain traits that are prevalent in particular people, then you have to have a pure sample. You can't have a sample that has this whole wide range and variety, random mix of genes, and determine that these type people are more prone to have a denser bone density. Because come on now, 47% from Africa, 53% from everywhere else. So who am I getting my bones from? I know a young man, his mother's from Cameroon, Africa, and his dad's from Italy. And so which bones does he have? Come on now. So what I was relying on, a conversation like this doesn't really necessarily need an individual to be scholarly, in the subject of genetics, but just, come on now, some common sense would give you to understand that there are no pure black people to make a definitive statement like that about black people. Just look at us. Come on now. How's that? Well, this was a pretty good conversation, I think. But I hope you got something out of it. Maybe kind of got rid of some myths. I mean, we can keep calling ourselves black, because I know I do. And even African American, I mean, that makes more sense because you're talking about a nation that people hail from, But for me, even the 47%, I'm still, I believe, more that than anything else, because everything else is a mixture that makes the 53%, okay? So I'm still black, okay? So if my daughter gets in trouble, it's black on black, okay? For real. But anyway, that's it. I hope you enjoyed this little short program. I know I did. You take care. Bye. Okay, bam. That was that.